Hey, Men of JFA. I hope you've had a great 3 weeks so far of the Man at March Challenge. We've heard a great word from Pastor James and Brother Bobby Scott and Pastor Matt on being able to engage to live, to love, and to unite. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about being engaged to lead. One of the great leaders in the Bible is the man Joshua. He served under Moses. And can you imagine being the person who followed Moses as the leader of the children of Israel? Moses was the man who led the children of Israel out of Egypt, where God performed many signs and wonders. Moses was the man who raised his staff, and God caused the wind to blow and parted the Red Sea. He went up the mountain and received 10 commandments. And when he came down, the glory of the Lord was on him. So can you imagine Joshua following Moses and how Joshua felt? I know me as a man, I compare myself to men all the time. I'm not a fix-it man. I don't know how to fix a lot of things. If you were to ask me what's wrong with my car right now, sitting in my carport, I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't even begin to know where to look. So I have a problem comparing myself to men sometimes. And the enemy will use that comparison to cause us to not step out, to not be the leaders that he's called us to be. But we need to know that God is providing a way for us to be leaders. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Comparing ourselves. Can you imagine Joshua thinking about all that Moses had done and now he was designed to be the leader? And so maybe that's why in Joshua chapter 1, God told Joshua several times to be strong and courageous. He probably needed to hear that because the things that God was going to have Joshua to do, Joshua was going to need to be courageous. You see, he was leading the children of Israel into the promised land. Moses had led them there, but Joshua was going to lead them into the promised land. And so he needed to be strong and courageous. You see, 40 years before that, the children of Israel were afraid. They'd sent the spies into the land, and they came back, and 10 of them said they can't go because of the giants in the land. So Joshua was getting ready to lead them finally, after 40 years, into the promised land. And Joshua told the people in Joshua chapter 3, verse 5, to consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Joshua was one of the 2 spies that came back and said we could take it. So Joshua had the confidence in the Lord already to know that God was going to do what he said he would do. So he was ready to lead them into the promised land. As men, God created us to be leaders. He placed us over our homes, our workplaces, our families and positions. He's calling us to lead even in these days. He's calling us to lead. So I want to talk about, there are many ways to lead that we as men need to lead, but I'm going to talk specifically about 3 different areas. And the first one, God is calling us to lead in upholding covenant relationships. I want to talk about 2 relationships today, and the first one is our relationship with Jesus. In Joshua chapter 5, 2 through 10, Joshua reinstates the covenant practice of circumcision among the children of Israel. This practice had ceased since the children of Israel had come out of Egypt, and all the folks who had come out of Egypt had passed away, had died in the wilderness. And so the practice of circumcision had ceased. And so God is looking for men today who will enter into covenant relationship with him, just as Joshua had all of the men at that time be circumcised and come into covenant relationship with God. Now Jesus is asking us to come into covenant relationship with him. Colossians chapter 2 verse 11 says, "In him you were also circumcised with the circumcision not performed by human hands. Your whole self, ruled by the flesh, was put off when you were circumcised by Christ." When we become saved, we lay down our old fleshly nature. If we are to lead as God would have us to lead, we are to die to the flesh. Men, one of the first steps in becoming leaders that God has called us to be, that is having a covenant relationship with him. Laying down our worldly flesh and embracing what God has for us and the salvation that he has for us. If you're watching this video and you don't have a relationship with him, I encourage you to stop this video right now and to say a prayer of asking God to forgive you of your sins, to come into your heart and be Lord of your life. I encourage you to do that right now if you haven't already done it. Another covenant relationship I want to talk about are to all of the men who are married and boys and men who are considering marriage or will be married at some point. God is telling us that we need to uphold our marriage in our covenant relationship with our wives. With a divorce rate of near or above 50% inside and out of the church, men, we are failing here. Many times our wives are the physical, spiritual, emotional leaders of the home, and men, that's not how it was created to be. This is an area where God is dealing with me on a daily basis. My wife and daughters need me to lead our home. They need me to be able to make wise decisions for the family. My wife needs me to love her and listen to and hear her, care for her needs, and to communicate, and not just with a nod of a head. My daughters need me to lead by example because they will one day choose a husband, and I want them to choose a husband based on the godly model. I want them to know what a godly husband should look like and be, not just in words, but in actions. And whether we like it or not, we are being watched, men, by a 5-year-old daughter who wants to be daddy's princess, by our 13-year-old son who sees how we treat his mom and forms his treatment of women after that, by our lost coworker who decided not to commit suicide last night because you prayed for them at work, by the cashier at Planet Kroger who didn't lose their job because you counted the change and they gave you too much and you returned the change, by the elderly grandmother who you opened the door for coming out of the bank. We are watched. In the second area, I believe that we're to be leaders is through obedience. God has called us to lead in being obedient. Joshua chapter 6 tells the story of the fall of the city of Jericho. Now, can you imagine the messenger of the Lord coming to Joshua and telling him that the way to conquer the city is to walk around the city? Now, men, it is our nature to take charge, to take control of the situation, to take care of business. But in this story, he's teaching us that if we will trust God, God will cause us to triumph, and it will be a great triumph. In the words in the story of Naaman in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 13, his servant tells him, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it?" Sometimes God has a direction for us, and because it seems simple or it seems not grand, we wonder if that's really what God will have us to do. We want to take charge and we want to do something grand. Admit it, man, we've taken the hard way of doing things just to prove we have been able to do it sometimes. Yeah, remember the shortcut you took? Yeah, I got lost too. Joshua could have chosen to take the mighty force of Israel and to attack the city of Jericho head on, but I doubt very seriously he would have been successful. Instead, he followed God's will and God's commands, and the walls of Jericho fell down. The other part of the obedience story in this happened right after the victory of Jericho. One man, Achan, didn't follow the command to destroy everything in Jericho, and he tried to hide what he found. At Israel's next battle, they were defeated very soundly at Ai, and Joshua was so confused, and he asked God, "Why did we lose? What happened, God?" And God very quickly told him there was sin in the camp. So Joshua became obedient. He wanted the sin out of the camp, and immediately they found out that it was Achan's sin and destroyed Achan. And then in the next battle, God caused the children of Israel to be successful and to be victorious. The third area God has called us to lead is to lead by example, similar to the last one, but I want to talk to you about a specific verse in Joshua 24:15. Joshua's coming to the end of his life. The children of Israel have been successful in many of their battles. They've invaded the land, the promised land, and beginning to set up. And God's given them directions on how to do that. And Joshua's coming to the end of his life. And he's really setting the children of Israel up to say, look, this is how I've lived my life. You're going to have to choose how to follow me or to live your life how you want to live it. But Joshua says in 24:15, "But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods of your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or will be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live now? But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua was stating that the children of Israel could follow him as he followed God. Paul says this also in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1. Paul says this, "Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ." And that's the New International Version. Paul told the Corinthian church that as he followed Christ, they should follow him. Paul was committing himself to following Christ so that under him, those under him could follow him to Christ. Paul was being very brave because he knew that he was living a life in front of those around him. He was telling them to look to him. So, man, that sets us up. If we want men to look at us and people to look at us, we're going to have to live a life that God has called us to. But the really good thing about it is God's there to help us through it. I've had many men in my life that I could tell how they have led me in many ways. My dad, my grandfathers, many friends, those that I've worked with. But I've had two men in particular in my life who I want to talk a little bit about today. Some Joshuas, I would call them, in my life who were leaders for me. Neither one of them, I think, know really the impact that they've had upon my life. One person is a guy by the name of Scott Gaunt. He attends here at JFA. He's the current assistant superintendent of the Paracle School District. And I really began to work with him at a very low point for me professionally. I doubted my abilities in everything that I did. But what he did for me is he expressed confidence in me. He offered advice and was an example to me. I'm very grateful for his encouragement and leadership in my life. I would not be here today in my positions in my profession without his leadership. And today, Scott, I say thank you. Another person who was a leader for me in my life was my Uncle Rob, although he probably doesn't realize it. He is an anchor to those around him and a godly example of husband, father, and servant. He serves in the church as deacon, and he leads our family now, my extended family on my mom's side. I've seen him lead that family through the loss of my grandfather, my aunt, my uncle, and he's a man of true godly character. And those are just two of the men who have lived lives of example before me. Now, men, whether we choose to or not, we are leaders. We lead those who we come in contact with every day. Just as Joshua picked up the mantle of leadership from Moses and helped the Israelites enter the promised land, we too must pick up the mantle of leadership in our homes, workplaces, church, to lead those around us to full potentials in Christ. Now, my two questions that I want us to think about this week are this. Number one, what areas do you currently see yourself as a leader? How are you leading those areas for Christ? And two, reflect on your life. What areas can you step up to be more of a leader than you currently are? As you pray this week, pray that God will show you areas where you can be a better leader than you already are. And pray that God will direct you in areas where He wants you to be a leader that you currently aren't. Guys, I hope you have a great week. I hope we're having better weather and going to have some spring. And we had a great service yesterday. I really believe God has changed in our lives. That's going to propel us into the future of what He has for us. And have a great day, and love you guys, and we'll see you soon.